Some of the most glorious empires in the history of the world come from the humblest beginnings, and many of these are all the more well known for their prodigious rise. The Mongols of Genghis Khan began as a small, isolated tribe, which 50 years later culminated in the most massive land empire of all time. Unknown to most, the powerful nomads of Central Asia formed another state in the ancient world, known to us as the Kushan Empire. How this realm was created and its importance to world history are some of the most fascinating tales yet to be told, and we shall do so in this video. Welcome to our video on the Great Yuezhi Migrations and the Kushan Empire. We're celebrating the second birthday of this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, as it's getting bigger and better than ever. In just 2 years, Raid has become the #1 RPG in the US, with more than 1 million people playing it daily. Most importantly, Raid has a great community, which is celebrating with songs, cosplay, and best wishes. There's never been a better time to start playing. Come join Raid for the 3rd year of battles, mayhem, and fun. What we like about the game are the awesome champions like Arbiter and Longbeard, alongside excellent epic music. For Raid's 2-year birthday, they've got 6 straight weeks of events planned running from March to mid-April, with insane prizes to win. Raid is launching the first clan vs clan tournament, and releasing the first champion in the badass Shadowkin faction, which we can't wait to see. If you want to get a huge head start, press the link in the description or scan our QR code, and you'll get your free epic champion Jotun, 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 3 ancient shards so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in game. All this treasure will be waiting for you here, only for the next 30 days and only for new players. It's easy, just click the link in the description and we'll see you in the game. Antiquity's Great Kushan Empire began with a powerful tribal confederation known as the Yuezhi. They had led a semi-nomadic lifestyle on the borders of China for a very long time, and had grown wealthy, facilitating the trade of jade and horses to the imperial dynasties. Inhabiting territories in and around what we now call the strategically crucial Gansu Corridor, the Yuezhi were not alone on the steppe. Many other barbarian groups surrounded them, but the most prominent were the Wusun and the Xiongnu. It is thought that the Yuezhi became so strong through cooperation with China that they began to scorn and attack their neighbors, forming bitter rivalries with them. In 220 BC, combined pressure from the Yuezhi and the expanding Qin dynasty forced the Xiongnu to the north. As this nomadic group was supposedly able to field 100,000 trained horse archer cavalry, it seems that they were the most powerful of the 3 major confederations on China's northwestern frontier, but this was about to change dramatically. The Xiongnu flight north prompted their chief, known as Touman, to send his eldest son Modu as a hostage to his conquerors. It seemed Modu was disliked by his father, who sought to have a younger son by a favored concubine as his heir instead. To this end, the cunning Touman raided Yuezhi lands soon after Modu's arrival, hoping that they would execute the royal hostage in retaliation. However, Modu was even more cunning than his father had anticipated. The Xiongnu prince stole one of the swiftest Yuezhi horses and managed to flee before his captors came to execute him. After his escape, Modu triumphantly made his way home, where he was welcomed back as a hero. Modu's father, now either impressed by his son's bravery or forced by popular opinion, put him in command of 10,000 cavalry. By all accounts, Modu proved himself to be a ferocious warrior, but this would be a double-edged sword for his father. By 209 BC, Modu had gained enough influence and status to assassinate Touman and establish himself as the Xiongnu ruler. He was Modu Chenyu, the Genghis Khan of the classical Far East. Under his rule, the nomadic Xiongnu were reorganized and immediately set about establishing their dominance over the steppe, crushing and subjugating many of the surrounding tribes. Among these unfortunate victims were the formidable Yuezhi, whom Modu attacked in 176. The Chenyu sent his Wise King of the Right, one of his subordinates, to annihilate them. While the Xiongnu forces gained victory, it was not the decisive extermination boasted of by Modu in his subsequent communication to the Chinese, and their adversaries continued to occupy lands in the Gansu Corridor. Other matters would take up Modu's attention until he passed away in 174, to be succeeded by his eldest son Jiju. 8 years later, the Xiongnu instigated another series of conquests. They first invaded the Beidi regions of China, before swinging to assault the Yuezhi once again. This was the final straw. A crushing defeat was inflicted by the Xiongnu, their rival ruler was killed, and his skull was turned into a drinking cup. The defeated confederacy, now under the slain king's successor, limped away, migrating away from the Gansu region with military forces which were still substantial and posed a great threat to any in their path. This expulsion created a domino effect, similar to that which drove the Huns towards the Roman Empire centuries later. From their Gansu homeland, the Yuezhi migrated around 2,000 miles west over the course of several decades. On their way, the tribes attacked another nomadic nation known as the Saka, who subsequently fled south into Bactria from the Ili River. The Yuezhi eventually arrived on steppe territories in the northern reaches of the Oxus River, otherwise known as the Amu Darya. In around the year 145, the Sakas crossed the Jaxartes River in their flight from the Yuezhi, resulting in a disaster for the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. The easternmost extent of Alexander the Great's conquests proved unable to resist their former Saka allies due to their many conflicts against the Seleucids and other enemies, which weakened them. Around this time, the city of Alexandria on the Oxus was destroyed by a Saka raid. Storerooms were looted, and many primary Greek buildings of the settlement were destroyed in an assault which ended permanent occupation of the site. These raids ended the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, but would not end the threat that the Yuezhi posed when, soon after, the Xiongnu and their bitter Wusun allies attacked the Yuezhi again. Realizing they were still not secure in their new lands, the Yuezhi pushed south into Bactria themselves and drove out the Saka, occupying the core of what would become the Kushan Empire. Completely overwhelmed by their nomadic kin, some of the Saka fled west into Parthia, while others traversed the Hindu Kush and conquered the remaining Indo-Greek kingdoms. These soon-to-be Hellenized conquerors would be known as the Indo-Scythians. We know that in this period, a Chinese envoy named Zheng Qian visited the Yuezhi, hoping to embark on a common alliance against the Xiongnu, which the Yuezhi tribes declined. Governance of the Bactrian Yuezhi lands during this time seems to have been divided, with the territory being split into 5 provinces. These regions represented 5 separate tribes of the Yuezhi Confederacy, and each was ruled by its own Shiho, or allied prince, who established separate royal residences within one of the subject walled cities in their territory. Professor Kenneth W. Hall suggests that this structure of rule was unified by a rolling chain of authority, where each of the 5 princes would hold supreme authority for a specific period and would then be replaced by another of the tribes. After a relatively hazy period which is shrouded in historical darkness, this all changed. Chinese sources state that in around 30 AD, one of the 5 princes attacked and subjugated the other 4, becoming king of the entire Yuezhi nation. This was Kujula Kadphises of the Kushan tribe, who united the Yuezhi territories and formed the Kingdom of Guishan, Kingdom of the Kushans. Not content with ruling just Bactria, the warlike Kushans attacked their western Parthian neighbor, seizing the strategic Kabul Valley. This was a plum conquest. Kabul was reasonably easy to conquer as it was on the frontiers of Parthia, and it was also extremely wealthy. Moreover, its capture gave the Kushans a route into India through the Hindu Kush. In what was perhaps an unintentional consequence, the conquests of the first Kushan emperor also cut the Indo-Parthians, who had invaded the Saka kingdoms, off from their allies in Iran. The Chinese estimated that the Kushan state contained 400,000 Yuezhi, of which a quarter were capable of fighting. This significant occupying force was in addition to the roughly 1 million strong settled population of Iranians and Asiatic Greeks. Most of the Kushan armies fought in the traditional style of their Yuezhi tribal ancestors who had fought against the Xiongnu a century and a half before, as horse archers. However, frescoes in Kushan royal palaces indicate that elite forces might have included cataphract heavy cavalry. It was clear that the mounted nature of their forces would prove an existential threat to the Parthian Empire, and Josephus records another Kushan attack against them. In 55 AD, Parthian king Vologases I marched to crush a rebellion in the western state of Adiabene. However, just before reaching the epicenter of the revolt, he received reports that his eastern territories were being attacked by Kujula Kedvasi's forces and their steppe allies. While the king was able to repel this Kushan raid, it seriously damaged Parthian prestige and indicated how much of a threat their new eastern neighbor posed. According to Chinese accounts, the great unifier Kujula Kedvases lived until he was more than 80 years old and died in roughly 80 AD. Despite us not knowing many concrete details about him due to a lack of authentic Kushan sources, he was clearly a key figure in Yuezhi history. His son and successor was Vima Takto, who quickly formed an alliance with the Chinese Protector General Ban Chao. This was the period in which the Han dynasty were reasserting control over the Tarim kingdoms, and Kangju forces were assisting rebels in the region. When these troublesome interlopers learned that the powerful Kushans to their south had entered an alliance against them, they quickly retreated to their homeland, fearing an attack from behind. It seems that despite helping the Chinese with their issue, the Yuezhi Empire did not receive what they had been promised, and they sought further political recognition. A request was made for a Kushan, perhaps the emperor himself, to enter a prestigious marriage with a Han princess, which was unceremoniously refused by Ban Chao. Perhaps irritated by Han ingratitude, Emperor Vima Takto raised a force of 70,000 horsemen, placed it under a senior general, and had it cross the Pamir Mountains. From here, it attacked the city of Kashgar in the Tarim Basin, which was under Chinese protection. Before the enemy arrived, Ban Chao hoarded all food supplies within the city and destroyed all the provisions which could not be brought in. As the Kushans put Kashgar under siege, this scorched earth approach was to have negative consequences for the nomads. Several attempts to break the city by assault failed, and their supplies soon began to run dry. When this happened, the army's general sent out a small detachment to the east in order to forage, a move Ban Chao had anticipated. The wily Protector General had placed contingents of his own troops at the ready, and they managed to destroy almost all of this scattered foraging unit. Now clearly without any hope of gaining supplies, the Kushans were forced to abandon the siege of Kashgar and return over the Pamirs. Though the armies of Vima Takto had failed to seize the Tarim Basin, the fact that they could go toe-to-toe with the Han Chinese indicates their power. Nevertheless, the expansionist Yuezhi ruling class would now concentrate on expansion south into India. Mounted armies were sent through the Hindu Kush into the Indus Valley, where they defeated the Indo-Parthian princes in the region. Han accounts describe how the Indians possessed large armies and fearsome war elephants, but that they were no match for the army of mounted archers the Kushans had at their disposal. This victorious army of conquest also took possession of the wealthy Indus trade ports, which were a primary destination for merchants from across the known world, including from the Roman Empire. Therefore, the Kushan Empire seized Indian lands which covered an area about the size of Asia Minor, and by doing so, essentially doubled its size, and established the Kushan Emperor as a major political force. The Book of Later Han describes how the Emperor Vima Takto installed generals to supervise and lead the Indus realms, and how, after this conquest, his realm became incredibly rich. Still, their origins were not forgotten by the Chinese, who would continue to call them the Great Yuezhi. Having enriched themselves by conquering the Indus, Vima Takto's successor, Vima Kedvases, who ascended to the Kushan throne in 100 AD, continued the inexorable expansion. He conquered further into North Indian lands and seized a series of kingdoms between the Indus and Ganges rivers. Showing us that the Kushans were beginning to see the necessity of sedentary administration, the native kings were killed and were replaced by steppe warlords who functioned as governors. These new Yuezhi tribal lords were required to send revenues from their assigned provinces to the central Kushan court as taxes, and were also to levy local troops, including the famous Indian war elephants, for defense or to partake in further enlargement of the empire. These Indian acquisitions made a range of valuable and lucrative resources available to the Kushan emperors, including turtle shell, gold and other metals, fine cotton cloths, wool carpets, spices, and perfumes. Control over the Indus ports also allowed the Kushans access to almost limitless varieties of Roman goods transported through the Indian Ocean trade routes. In addition to acting as intermediaries for Silk Road and Indian Ocean trade, the Kushans maintained their own commercial dealings. Merchants from the Kushan Empire maintained the export of famous Bactrian horses to states which required cavalry. A 3rd century Chinese envoy named Kang Tai reported that the Yuezhi were continually sending horses by sea to places as far-flung as Sumatra. With these rich new imperial lands sending wealth back to the Kushan court and increasing its power, Emperor Vima Kadphises decided to once again attempt to gain influence over the strategically placed city of Kashgar, which sat on the western edge of the Tarim silk routes. A direct assault had failed, so the Kushans now tried political intrigue. When the king of Kashgar passed away in around 120 AD, though the date is not fully known, the Kushans offered to support his brother Chen Pan in his own bid for sovereignty, probably under the condition that he would serve as a client to them. With a retinue of elite Kushan troops at his side, Chen Pan returned to Kashgar and marched into the court, demanding that the king's son abdicate immediately in his favor. The force of Kushan assistance and Chen Pan's popularity and well-respected status in Kashgar meant that there was no conflict in this succession. However, the Chinese determined that the people of Kashgar dreaded the Kushans due to these events. Emperor Kanishka the Great came to the throne in around 127 AD and quickly continued the actions of his predecessors by expanding the Kushan Empire's Indian territories towards the Upper Ganges region. His coins and inscriptions have been found near the ancient cities of Mathura, Patna and Gaya. It seems that Kanishka was also the first Kushan emperor to convert to Buddhism, as shown in 2 ancient Buddhist traditions. At an unknown point, it is reported that the cruel and obstinate Parthian monarch Vologases III attacked Kanishka's realm with an army of horse archers, cataphracts, bowmen and spearmen. Kushan forces managed to defeat the Parthians, whose king Kanishka severely punished for this invasion. Despite the victory in battle, Kanishka was supposedly appalled by the level of suffering that warfare had brought, and repented, seeking the advice of religious leaders. If this story sounds familiar, it is probably because this tale was inspired by the revelation of Ashoka the Great. Whatever the case, it does seem that Kanishka became a benefactor of Buddhism, helping to promote and patronize teachings of the faith across his empire. An important Buddhist council was convened in Kashmir during his reign, at which it was agreed that leading religious texts, known as sutras, were to be translated into accessible and more common forms of Sanskrit. Royal coffers also funded the construction of a massive stupa near Purushapura, which was one of the greatest in all India, and which was probably partly constructed by Greek artisans. Only the foundations of this Kanishka stupa remain today, but modern archaeology suggests that its dome had a diameter of around 286 feet, almost twice the size of the circular concrete roof on top of Hadrian's Pantheon in Rome. While Ashoka of the Mauryan Empire had pioneered the spread of Buddhism around the world and popularized it for a brief time in India, it was the Kushans who transmitted the faith to China and beyond, where it had a decisive impact. During the 2nd century AD, Buddhist merchants from the Kushan Empire made frequent journeys across the Silk Road to the wealthy lands of China in order to trade their goods. However, they also brought many teachings of the Buddha to the Tarim kingdoms and also helped promote them in major Chinese cities. In effect, Kushan merchants used the prospering Silk Road to become the conduit of Buddhism to the Far East. One of the early Chinese converts to Buddhism was a Han prince named Liu Ying, a younger half-brother to the Han Emperor Ming, who ruled from 58 to 75 AD. Suspicious of this invasive new faith at first, the Han government performed an investigation of Liu Ying in 65 AD, but could not find any evidence in his character of any subversion against the empire. Seemingly curious of this faith which had entranced his relative, Emperor Ming sent an envoy overland to discover more about this foreign religion. This representative returned in 67 AD with 2 Indian monks named Mo Tung and Zhu Falan, who entered Luoyang with religious texts and sacred images carried on white horses. Consequently, the impressed Emperor Ming gave his approval to the Buddhist religion, and its symbols and statues began appearing in China. Further showing us how crucial the Indian steppe empire was to this cultural diffusion, one of the leading monks in the transfer of ideas to China was a Kushan missionary. This man was from the wealthy Kushan province of Gandhara and was known as Lokaksema. He taught in the Chinese capital and later translated crucial Buddhist texts into the Chinese language as an official member of the Han court from 150 to 189 AD. We always have more stories to tell, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.